whenever my now-grown daughters, whenever I suggest to them that something that they were thinking of doing seemed risky or not very well thought out, they always had the best comeback. Mom, after what you and Dad did, how can you think our staying out all night or whatever is risky? What they were referring to was our decision in 1982 to get married in Istanbul, Turkey, and to give birth to them there a few years later. This wasn't your dream wedding in an exotic location. It was a lightning marriage to Nasit, standing next to me, whom I met a few years ago when we were graduate students in New Jersey. Nothing in our upbringings, I think, would have led you to imagine that we were going to get together. I, Libby, grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, in an Orthodox Jewish family. And except for losing my Southern drawl when I went to college in Boston, I think my life had been pretty predictable, and I would say just a little bit boring.
Well, I have not lost my accent. and I did not have a boring childhood. My mother's family were devout Muslims. My mother prayed 5 times a day, yet she managed to sing and dance the Charleston while cooking.
Maybe that's our missing link?
Maybe. My father was a senior army sergeant and also an impressionist painter, and he managed to be tone deaf and ignorant of any calls to prayer. He could have been an officer, but he was expelled from the military academy because he made too many practical jokes. That might be a family tradition. When I was 8 months old in 1953, my father was sent to the Korean War as part of the Turkish contingent. My grandparents and the rest of the family, in order to compensate for a boy without a father, they spoiled me rotten. They let me do anything I wanted. They encouraged me through all the childhood. My grandmother, Evan, house-trained chickens in her kitchen, fastidiously clean woman, so I will have fresh eggs every morning in the winter. With all this encouragement, at age 6, my mother will let me actually take the trolley for a 30 minutes ride all the way to downtown Istanbul, and so that I can play at the most modern playground in Istanbul, so that it will be near the Blue Mosque in the middle of all the strangers.
Just a downer note, that's pretty much the location of the recent suicide bombing in Istanbul.
It was safe then, maybe too safe for my imagination. In order to reduce my boredom and compared my life to Turkish tales my father used to tell, I decided at age 6 to run away from home, leveraging my knowledge, full knowledge of the public transport system in Istanbul. After quite a travail, I was returned back to my parents, much to their relief, by some quick-thinking city bus driver, after maybe 6-8 hours. But that is another story, our project. The poetic justice for my escape artistry came shortly after that, when I was ready for my traditional Muslim circumcision at age 7. Protective Turkish families don't tell to their sons what is going to happen. My ever practical joker father told me, "Oh, it is nothing. They will just tie ribbons on you in the colors of your most favorite soccer team. Just go ahead, tell it. If a family could not afford the private, expensive feast and entertainment for such an occasion, you joined other families in a communal celebration. So I was part of a mass circumcision, which means there is a long line of boys naked under their flowing robes, white robes, with some ridiculous-looking cylindrical cardboard hat on their heads. And somebody will call, "Next." So this boy will go in yelling something, and then will come out crying. I looked at my father. I said, "What is happening?" And with perfect poise, he turned to me and said, "Oh, they must have used the wrong color of ribbons." That was before they started using analgesics and painkillers and anesthesia in circumcision. However, that ridiculous hat was quite a functional help because it protected the fresh wounds from touching the robe. Years later, when I was at the Fine Arts Center watching the show Jacques Brel is Well and Alive and Living in Paris, the song "Next, Next," you can imagine how squeamish I was. For those of you who don't know this song, it is an anti-war song, and it describes a long line of semi-naked soldiers waiting in front of a French mobile army whorehouse. And it goes something like that. Next, next.
I was still just a kid. There were hundreds like me. I followed a naked body followed me.
Next, next.
I was still just a kid when my innocence was lost.
Next, next.
Me, I really would have liked a little touch of tenderness.
Well, what awaited me at the end of line was not a touch of tenderness, but a sharp razor. With that sharp reminder of pain in life, I zigzagged somehow and ended up at Princeton with a graduate scholarship from the Turkish government. There, for the first time, I went folk dancing.
And that's where we met. Nasit told me that he was about to finish his dissertation in about 2 months and he'd be returning to Turkey. So I thought this might be fun. 2 years later, he did finish his dissertation. And needless to say, our relationship had gone beyond weekly folk dancing by that point. So we decided that the summer after he returned, I would go to visit him. And it was a glorious summer in a magical city. I spent every morning studying Turkish, and then in the afternoons we would take ferry boats to different neighborhoods along the Bosporus. We would go to nearby swimming in Black Sea beaches. We would eat the freshest local yogurts, fruit, fish that I'd ever consumed.
When I told my mother before Libby arrived that she is a professor of economics, she was quite alarmed. She thought, why would my son marry such an old woman? Because in Turkey, you reach the professorship only at very mature age. She was also worried about how would she gossip with her in English because she didn't speak English. Well, Libby learned the English in those Turkish in those 2 summer months, and they went along swimmingly, and Libby was gonna visit me back in the winter break. By that time, I was working at the Turkish National Research Institute, and I didn't accumulate enough vacation days, so I went to the institute director. I said, "My girlfriend is coming. Can I borrow some vacation time?" He looked at me with a gleam in his eye. He said, "You know, Nash, we don't do such things here. But," he said, "if you get married, you get 15 days of vacation."
So we might have been in love, but indeed we married for 15 days of vacation. Now, I was there for a month, so you'd think, no problem, right? But remember, this is the land that gave meaning to the term Byzantine. There were, in fact, two obstacles to our getting married. The first is that there's normally a 15-day waiting period between when you apply to get married and when you can actually get married. To get around that, we needed a lightning marriage decree. So Nasit went to a judge, explained the situation. He said, "You need a legal excuse, like acute appendicitis." So Nasit went to a doctor, and he said, "I need a diagnosis of acute appendicitis." And the doctor just smiled knowingly, did no examination, wrote the note. Nasit took it to the judge. We got the lightning marriage decree, so we'd save 15 days, just like that. But then there's the second obstacle, and that is that when a Turkish man marries a foreign woman, she's offered citizenship, whether
Even if he doesn't any appendicitis.
whether she wants it or not. Getting that entails going to a lot of scary government offices to gather signatures of approval. For example, we had to go to the Criminal Offenses Bureau, the Narcotics Bureau, Financial Bureau, Political Bureau, and my favorite bureau, the Bureau of Vices, whatever those were. When we went to the kind of dingy marriage bureau, the bureaucrat there pointed out a stack of files about 3 feet tall, yellowing, dusty. He said, "Those are the files of couples like you who've been trying to do this for months or years, and you're going to try and do it in a couple of weeks?" Sure. With our youthful enthusiasm and our young love, we set off to do the seemingly impossible. The way it works is that you go into each bureau and you have to take your paperwork and get it approved and signed by literally dozens of bureaucrats. We knew that if we didn't stay with the papers, they were going to languish on somebody's desk and we'd never see them again. So we would hand carry them, flatter whoever we had to talk to, drink tea with them, and emerge with the signed documents. Nasit, no vacation, had to go back to work. So I continued on my own, mustering all my Turkish, plastering on my innocent smile. And as far as I can tell, no one ever checked a real record of mine. The conversations would go something like this.
Türkiye'yi seviyor musun?
Oh, I just love it here in Turkey.
Sen iyi bir insana benziyorsun, öyle misin?
There are really good people here, and I'm one of them.
Öyle mi? Peki gel bakalım bir çayımızı iç. İstersen kahve al.
I think I'll have tea. Thanks so much for your hospitality. And where do I take these papers next? After about 10 days, I think I'd collected 100, I don't want to exaggerate, 125 signatures. My bladder was exploding. And we realized that if we maybe hired a taxi for a day, we could finish things up. Because I don't know if you know Istanbul, but it spans 2 continents. So you're crossing Asia and Europe, and it takes a lot of time. So we got in the car, go into an office. We'd come out. The taxi driver was cheering us on. He was driving faster and faster. It was like we were in a chase for some glory of this wedding. And about midway through the day, he said, "Can I have some money?" And we said, "Are you afraid we're not going to pay you?" Possible. He said, "Oh, no. You people are so lucky at collecting signatures that I want to buy a lottery ticket with money that has passed through your hands. And lucky we were. We got back to the marriage bureau just in time. The bureaucrat there was stunned. He said, you need 2 witnesses. We called in 2 people who worked there. We bought a box of baklava to share with everybody in the office, and we said our state-sanctioned vows.
Thank you. However, we made a rash decision 34 years ago. I was afraid that lightning marriage was a code word for something more sinister than putting rings on your fingers. It turned out to be more agreeable. And we went in and out from our traditions to keep our union going. But as you know, traditions have a way of resisting and surviving, even sometimes flipping 180 degrees. For example, you may not know that 100 years ago, all baby boys were dressed in strong pink dresses and girls in sedate blue.
One of our family traditions did repeat when one of our daughters ran away when she was 6 years old, and she said it was because she needed adventure.
Our older daughter got a real wedding, not in a church, but in the basement of the Ellie Calkins Opera House, and it cost just a bit more than a kilo of baklava.
A friend of ours from folk dancing, English teacher in town, who sends out cards on the first day of spring instead of at the traditional Christmas, New Year's time, and who was the first belly dancer, I think, in town, officiated at the wedding, and that was traditional enough for us.
Our grandson, born last December, had the most easy circumcision. At his first day of life. I'm certainly extremely jealous and envious of him, but I certainly plan to spoil him, maybe with a pink dress.
So one day, our children came running in with a burning question. How is it that we turned out so normal?
It is funny. We thought we were normal too. Thank you.